So we are back once again with another big dump of New World information. Month after month, they continue to roll out these updates that I'd say have been pretty impressive. Like, they're adding a lot of new stuff. So in this most recent update, they've included a brand new magic-based weapon, which is the Ice Gauntlet. This is the third magic weapon in the game. This one focuses on ice elemental damage, control, protection, and even some summoning. There's a brand new open world PvP system of faction control points. This is separate from the wars and outpost rush mode, and it looks to provide a consistent form of open world PvP. There are also two brand new 5-player dungeons, which they call those expeditions. There's a brand new achievement system in the game, and a host of more general and balanced changes that they've added. We are just continuing with each one of these videos to be like, wow, yeah, they keep adding more and more stuff. It's absolutely crazy. So I want to take you through this update, go through the patch notes, cover all the key important things, and give you some of my thoughts on it as we go through as well. So let's start off with the newest and probably most exciting thing, which is the brand new weapon. This is the Ice Gauntlet. Like I said, it's a new magic weapon that harnesses the elemental power of ice. Attacks with this weapon are going to scale off of intelligence, which I believe that's the same as the Fire Staff. And there are two mastery trees, the Ice Tempest that focuses on damage and area denial, and then the Ice Conjurer that focuses on crowd control, protection, and a deployable ice pylon that fights alongside the player, improving their power and efficiency. That's pretty cool. I think that's the first like summon type skill that they've added to this game. I don't recall anything else on any of the other weapons. That's pretty neat. Hopefully this is a trend that we keep on seeing with other stuff. Now, like every other weapon, the Ice Gauntlet is going to have its very own end game variant. They call this legendary weapon the Rime Lash. And I have to say, just in general, that I'm super happy to see this. I really hope they keep pushing in this direction. As of now, a majority of the weapons in the game are either melee or ranged, with the magic weapons being the Fire Staff, the Life Staff, and now the Ice Gauntlet. And I'd like to see more of this stuff. Like, we could potentially see some sort of a poison-based weapon, a lightning staff possibly, and even more so the fact that they're introducing summons. Like, imagine like a death staff or something where you could summon up skeletons or zombies. Like, this is pretty cool. I really hope they keep pushing in this magic direction. I kind of like that for the world that they've built. I'd like to see more high fantasy stuff instead of just all the swords and bows and things like that. So pretty cool. Happy about the Ice Gauntlet. Let's move on though to the second and also really cool new addition. And this is the faction control points. So they say this is to incentivize PvP and make the influence race more interesting. This is the ability to fight over these forts in a territory outside of these scheduled wars. So as you know, as of now, we've had that 50 versus 50 war system, which it was scheduled once daily. You had to sign up and you had to be handpicked to actually participate. Beyond that, it would just be random open world PvP that you could come across. This is going to give a focal point. So now basically there are going to be capturable points in every territory fort. Players can capture these points by having more members of their faction inside the point than any of the other factions. Obviously, this leads to the potential imbalance of the faction issues, but that's another topic for another day, I think. Forts that have been captured will remain captured until a different faction either claims the fort themselves or wins a war for the territory. Now, there are a few stipulations when it comes to engaging in this open world PvP fort capture thing. First of all, you're going to need to be flagged for PvP before you can even enter one of those claimed forts. They say that these control points will be activated 60 minutes after a war or invasion is completed, and they will be deactivated once a war or invasion is declared. So this whole open world control point of the fort's PvP skirmishing that'll be taking place will be in the window between the wars, but that's a majority of the day. That's a long period of time. And what's going to push people to do this? Well, there are incentives. Controlling a fort will provide a 5% increase to experience gain, as well as a 20% increase to the influence within that territory for the faction members. So remember, New World has 3 PvP factions. You choose your faction. I think it was at level 10 that you get to pick. From there on, at least in the preview event, it didn't seem to make that much of a difference, like what faction controlled the territories. Basically, I guess the point is I never really cared cared what my faction was doing and who owned what territory. But it seems like with these capturable points and there being a 5% bonus to experience and a 20% increase to influence within those territories, now there's some incentive that might push me to go to these forts, go to these control points, and actually participate in this open world PvP so that I can get those bonuses. But there's more bonuses in addition to that. So each of the forts in the game will have a unique global zone buff for the controlling faction. So some examples are a reduced fast travel cost, increased item gains whenever you're gathering resources, reduction in the cost of taxes, increased coin and experience rewards. Those are just a few examples, but literally every zone in the game will have some sort of a unique global zone benefit for whichever one of the three factions controls those territories. So to put it simply, this is basically like King of the Hill for the three factions in every zones. In fact, it's pretty darn similar to what they did in Burning Crusade. Was it Hellfire Peninsula, where depending on Horde or Alliance, whoever controlled those three towers, there was some sort of a zone-wide buff. But that's going to apply to every zone in this game. Every zone will have those forts and that kind of King of the Hill mode that goes on. Now, again, clearly there's going to be this concern and probably a constant debate of, hey, this faction way outnumbers the other two factions and they're always winning those things. But I think because there are so many different zones and so many different forts and so many different players with their own incentives and goals, there's probably going to be that constant tug of war, you know? Maybe you've got a big group of players going from control point to control point, from fort to fort, to try to turn the flag over and capture the zone for their faction. And then you have smaller groups, when those big groups leave, sneaking in and then flipping it back. There's going to be that constant back and forth. And I guess the biggest thing here is once they change this game from being constantly open PvP with everyone flagged all the time to a toggle system, unless people were trying to farm those PvP quests for like faster experience, you weren't seeing a ton of open world PvP beyond like Zergin groups. Like I played like 60 hours of that of the New World preview event, and I rarely like had small skirmishes with one or two other players. I saw like death balls of players running around all flagged while I was flagged, and I would clearly avoid those because that's just instant death. But the small scale stuff never really happened. This, I think, creates these interesting opportunities where, again, there'll be this back and forth as different groups and different sizes groups of players go to each of the zones and each of these control points and try to flip them to get that bonus experience. Ultimately, though, I think this is a really good thing. There are plenty of problems we could pick out, but just in general, I really like this direction. I like what they're trying to do with this. Okay, so let's move on to some of the other new stuff. There are 2 new expeditions. As a reminder, this is what they call their 5-player instance dungeons. So the first new one is called Lazarus Instrumentality. This is a secret site that they say may hold the key to the origins of the ancient guardians. This is a temple of the ancients. It is located in Reekwater and features 2 boss encounters. The Scylla boss, which is a creature that utilizes lethal weaponry and destructive magic, and then Shardis, a colossal ancient construct that stands over the Lazarus well. We got a few screenshots of him. We also just got a few screenshots of this dungeon in general. I really like the way this looks. I love their whole like ancient temple theming and styling that they have. This is scattered throughout New World in the different zones, but I just think it's a cool setting and backdrop for these dungeons. I really like this. The second new dungeon is this Dynasty Shipyard. This will be located in Ebonscale Reach. That's that brand new endgame zone that was added in a prior update. The Empress, which is the big bad character in this zone, is building a fleet of warships with her new corrupted army, and there are also 2 boss fights in this, so it does appear like, yes, every dungeon is going to have 2 main bosses as well as the trash bosses. The first boss is Isabella's pets, Joven and Oro. The second boss is actually the Empress herself, so it looks like we'll be fighting her. So 2 new dungeons, awesome. They keep rolling these out. I'm assuming we're probably going to get a dungeon for just about every zone. This is either 4 or 5 dungeons that we know of as of the moment. Now let's move on to some new systems. They've added an achievement system to the game. This is, of course, to keep track and reward players for various accomplishments. They say that there are going to be over 400 achievements in the game, with more to follow, and there will be a new achievements tab to go alongside this. This will be found in the character screen. All achievements will be listed, but some of them will be hidden behind hints, so you'll have to kind of intuit what they are, or just go check the wiki, your choice. Now we've got some more general changes with this update. They say they've added voice over lip sync to quest givers for the main story quest. You might recall in the previous update, they added voice to the main story quest. Now there's some lip sync to go along with it. Some changes to the PvP faction mission missions. They say they've introduced a new style of PvP missions, which requires players to complete missions in contested areas where their faction's opponents will be competing to accomplish their own objectives. Now, I kind of assumed that this was already the case. There were PvP missions. They brought you to specific locations. I just assumed that all of the different factions were all brought to relatively the same locations so that we would encounter each other. So I'm not exactly entirely sure what the difference here is between the prior iteration of the PvP missions. Basically, the point is they're going to be PvP missions that bring different factions to the same area. They will be themed differently so that each of the factions have more flavor. I think that's a great thing because it didn't feel like the factions had much personality behind them, but beyond the different colors. Also, some changes to the PvE faction missions. They say these are now going to be multi-step across all territories and are designed to give players a curated tour to locations that fit their selected mission type. So kind of bringing us around the different zones with the different types of PvE quests. That's pretty cool. Now, like we were just talking about with the PvP control points and them having bonuses, there are going to be some more bonuses for territory control in general. So they say that they've added numerous benefits for all members of a faction that controls a territory, as well as some additional rewards for the controlling company. Now, keep in mind that control comes through the process of winning those wars. So if your faction wins a war, you have control of that territory, of that zone. So the first big benefit is going to be any two settlements that are controlled by the same faction will have their settlement storages linked, and players can then transfer items from a storage linked to their current location for a coin fee. That's pretty huge. Having stuff in storage and carrying around with a limited weight capacity became a huge issue the more and more I played that preview event, and the fact that I could like basically fast travel items between settlement locations that my faction controls, all of this puts more weight behind I'm invested in my faction doing well and controlling as many points as possible. They have also added a resource cart to each town that will provide members of the controlling faction with a small amount of resources and refining reagents. Again, this has me more invested. I want my faction to control this territory and own the settlements so that I get these bonus resources in this cart. Pretty cool stuff. Okay, we got a couple of progression updates that I think you should know about. So they've updated some milestone rewards. They have added a tier 2 and tier 3 Azoth staves, and these will be unlocked as you progress through the story at levels 30 and 40, and you will need those higher tier Azoth staffs to cleanse those higher level corrupted breaches. They also say that players will now unlock different tiers of their camps, and these are basically your respawn points that you can set out in the wild, starting with a tier 1 camp at level 5 up to a tier 5 camp that is unlocked at level 55. They also say now that the 4th consumable slot unlocks at level 25 instead of 45, and a player's first house is now unlocked at level 15, second house at 35, third house at 55. Each of these are 5 levels sooner than they were previously. All right, so now on to some loot and gear updates. There's some pretty cool things in here, including some changes to the perk system. So they've removed some of the named shields from the faction shop and replaced them with these faction specific shields. They've added some more visual variety to armor sets across the board. So they've updated the visuals for all tier 5 armor, and now also high level corrupted, lost, and angry earth enemies all have a chance to drop armors with a themed style. Elite corrupted creatures will also have an updated armor style that can drop. They've added named items to the brand new expeditions. Every expedition will have a variety of exclusively random drops, and each boss in an expedition will have their own selection of special items they drop. This is good stuff. Give us like unique items for each of these locations. This pushes people to farm those things, as long as for different builds or different play styles, they're good items for those particular roles. They've also, I like this, they've increased the minimum gear score that can drop from creatures, which they say should increase the likelihood of players getting more desirable gear scores on their drops as they level their character and fight tougher enemies. Thank goodness. It feels like in so many games, most of the loot that you get that drop from like creatures in the environment or even farming elite creatures, it all generally is garbage. You just end up like disenchanting it or selling it or whatever. It seems like most of the time, all your best stuff is going to come from special quest rewards or special dungeons or crafting or whatever. So the fact that basically they're making it so the random items that drop in the world are going to be much more likely to be actual upgrades and things that we will actually equip, that's a good thing, I think. It's nice. Make it so that it doesn't feel like every time a random item drops off of a mob, it's instantly trashed, right? Then they say they've also added a unique set of Outpost Rush specific named armor and weapons that appear as rare drops from the Outpost Rush reward chest. All of this loot gear changes here, all good stuff. Give us unique stuff, give us cool looking sets, give us things to strive for as we farm the different types of gameplay, the expeditions, the outpost rush, farming specific elite mobs, whatever. Good stuff. I like it. Some gear perks things that are pretty cool here. They've added and updated all perks in the game. They said there are now 150 different perks across all item types. They've introduced new perks whose power will scale dynamically off of an item's gear score. And probably most interestingly of all, they have added 6 mastery ability perks per weapon, 1 perk for each ability in the mastery tree, and these perks modify the base functionality of one of the weapon's abilities. I said that sentence really slow, but it's because I think this is really freaking cool. I saw no examples of what this means, but this idea that we're gonna have these weapon perks that will change how abilities function, I really, really like that. I think that's a really good direction, and some perks will now feature internal cooldowns. Likely these will be for perks that have some sort of a triggered ability, like, you know, maybe you have a chance on attack to activate a bonus smash or something, and that's going to have an internal cooldown, of course, so it's just not constantly happening. Okay, now onto some crafting and gathering changes. These tend to be the least interesting to me, but I want to mention them to you. Expeditions will now include expedition exclusive resources in their drop tables, and they say that these resources, these special expedition resources, are used to craft replicas of the non-named expedition exclusive equipment, enabling crafters to create powerful items with guaranteed perk outcomes. Pretty cool stuff. They've added new components and more recipes for jewel crafting to make that a more viable profession. They've also added this new gem, Carnelian, and this is used for threat generation or reduction. So if this gem is put into a weapon, it actually adds a taunt effect to select abilities. However, if this gem is slotted into an armor piece, it's going to actually reduce the amount of threat that that player generates. Next up, we've got a couple of combat changes worth mentioning. They say now that ranged attacks can be fired through non-enemy players. Now ranged players only need to worry about hitting the enemy, not firing around their allies. On one hand, you could say, oh, it takes away from like the strategy of having to try to make sure your teammates aren't body blocking you, but it also makes range just feel that much more weak. Like if the melee players can just run up and smash away at these enemies, and the ranged people never get a chance to hit them because they're constantly being body blocked and things are dying too fast for them to reposition in time, I think this is a fine change, personally. They say as well that they've continued to tune and refine the AI combat experience. This has been an ongoing process that they've continuously worked on. They've also added a new mechanic, this large enemy stagger. So they say that certain large enemies will now take stamina damage when you use a charged heavy attack or any hard-hitting abilities, which if you eventually get it all the way down, it puts them into this long, highly punishable state. So basically, you wear down their stamina and you get a chance to well at them for like 5 or 10 seconds, however long it is, right? Okay, now let's move on to some changes to the attribute point system. They've added attribute threshold bonuses. So these are going to give a persistent bonus to players for maintaining certain point values of each attribute. These bonuses are awarded every 50 points invested into a single attribute, and each threshold is going to have both combat and non-combat bonuses. So let me just run through the strength bonuses just to give you an example of how this is going to work. At 50 strength, you'll get 15% damage to melee weapon light attacks and 10% mining speed. At 100 strength, you get 20% damage to melee weapon heavy attacks and plus 20 encumbrance. At 150 strength, you get 50% stamina damage from melee weapon light and heavy attacks, minus 10% decrease in weight of mined items. At 200 strength, it is plus 20 damage on stunned, slowed, or rooted enemies and plus 10 mining speed. At 250 strength, stamina regenerate continues while performing light and heavy attacks with melee weapons, and you get 10% yield increase when mining. And then finally, at 300 strength, light and heavy attacks with melee weapons gain grit, and wow, that's really good. That's really good. You get grit on your basic attacks. Wow. And then a 25% chance to fully mine an ore node with a single swing. So yeah, once you scale up and you get to that very high tier of whatever one of these attributes, some pretty massive bonuses there. So those were just the bonuses for strength. I'm not going to read off every single one, but there will be similar bonuses for dexterity, intelligence, focus, and constitution. And then wrapping things up here, there were some balance changes. The hatchet got some tuning to various skills that were too strong or too weak. The musket saw some boost in damage to numerous attacks, anywhere between 5 and 15%. We saw a small adjustment to the fire staff's fireball, and then both the bow and warhammer got some minor tweaks. And then the final update here is to some user experience, user interface changes. They've added secure player trading. There have been some inventory updates and some UI visual updates. These were pretty small things as well, but just some more fine tuning. And those are the patch notes for this April update. As I've mentioned, as I've talked about in video after video that we've done covering this stuff, it's more huge things. They just keep rolling out big changes. We got a brand new weapon. We got a new open world PvP with this bonus system for the faction that controls these things. Various changes to gear and this attribute point bonus system. It's just freaking so much, dude. It's so good. This game's really coming together. I hope these developers aren't working 80 hours a week, but make sure, you know, hey, Amazon, make sure you're taking care of your employees, okay? Because I don't know how you're pumping out this much content, but it's been impressive, at least as like a prospective player of this game. This stuff is looking and sounding really good, and yeah, New World is continuing to shape up and come together. I am super stoked to finally get my hands back on this game and play it again, and just see all this new stuff in action. I really like the direction that they're going. Continue to really like a lot of these changes. There are gripes we can have, there are complaints and possible bad situations, like we could talk about with the Zergish nature of this open world PvP for these control points at these forts. Yeah, sure. That's gonna be an issue that'll come up. We'll complain about that likely, but just in general, again, the direction, the decisions, the things that they're adding, it's good. I think New World's coming together. And yeah, that's gonna do it for today. That is the most recent New World update. Thank you guys for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll continue to keep you guys updated about once a month with these things. I think we got some stuff coming up too, checking out the expeditions soon in the future. Well, that'll stay tuned for that. Well, I don't even know if yeah, anyways. That's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time, right?